Hi, and welcome to New God Sunday School. I'm Tom Scioli, author of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics. I Am Stan, a graphic biography of the legendary Stan Lee, and Jack Kirby's Star Warriors, The Adventures of Adam Starr and the Solar Legion. Tomorrow, Monday, August 28th, is Jack Kirby's 106th birthday. It's also the final order cutoff date for Jack Kirby's Star Warriors. So if you'd like your local comics retailer to set aside a copy for you, let them know right away because the final order cutoff date is tomorrow. Here it is, the origin issue of the newest, most sensational young superhero in comics. Issue number 15 of Mr. Miracle, Super Escape Artist. Now, the final panel next issue blurb in the previous issue promised that this issue was going to be the untold story of Big Barda, some kind of, origin story or flashback story or some, big secret we were going to find out about Big Barda. But it seems like that's been scrapped. There's really, nothing like that in this issue. Instead, we get the origin of Shiloh Norman, who becomes Mr. Miracle's kid sidekick. This is his origin story. In Grant Morrison's Seven Soldiers miniseries, Shiloh Norman takes up the mantle of Mr. Miracle, becomes the new Mr. Miracle. Since, Mr. Miracle was kind of a generational character to begin with, Scott Free inherited the Mr. Miracle mantle from Thaddeus Brown, so Shiloh Norman inherit the act from Scott Free when Scott Free moves on to other things. So let's take a look. Great cover. So the first panel starts out centered on Big Barda. So maybe Jack Kirby started out with the intention to tell, Big Barda's backstory, which seems kind of impossible. I was kind of dubious reading that blurb in the previous issue because, how can you tell about Big Barda's secret past if you can't mention Apocalypse or anything like that? So here we go. We have Big Barda standing there, and we have Shiloh Norman in the background, and a police detective who's there with Shiloh. Edited, written, and drawn by Jack Kirby, lettered and inked by Mike Royer. We get a nice enough double-page splash. Now, I've mentioned the stories in the comics, after the cancellation of New Gods and Forever People. The stories in the Mr. Miracle comics have been sort of dumbed down. They're not nearly as interesting as the stories that preceded them. And this was what editorial was telling Jack Kirby, that his comics were going over the heads of the bulk of their readership, which is kids. And so to kind of make it a little more kid-friendly, in essence, dumb it down, which, was sort of the stated philosophy of DC Comics at the time. And so Jack dumbed it down, but he didn't pull any punches in terms of the artwork. The artwork was still, up to like a really high standard. And the previous issue, Madame Evil Eyes, the drawings at least were as good as anything Kirby's done. But this issue, I'm seeing a definite slide in terms of the drawing. The drawings seem, much more rushed, much more simplified, and kind of, feels like Kirby's losing interest. That's the impression I get in this series. And so this is a beautiful double-page spread, but it's a little lean by Jack Kirby standards. I also wonder, the inks don't seem quite up to like the normal standard either. And I know that Mike Royer is going to be leaving as Jack Kirby's regular inker, pretty shortly, in a couple more issues. And I know he was that D. Bruce Berry, who picks up where Mike Royer left off. I know that he assisted Mike, prior to his departure. Just being Jack Kirby's full-time inker, you got to ink as fast as Jack Kirby writes and draws. So it's a big job. So I do wonder. There are panels in here that look more like D. Bruce Berry than Mike Royer, but who knows? Kirby's not really going to town on any of these panels. Mr. Miracle's put in this giant wrench inside of this little tube, inside of this little capsule. Big Barda's going to squeeze this wrench, and she squeezes it right away, and crunch. Mr. Miracle's nowhere to be found, but there he is. Big smile on his face. So now we introduce Shiloh Norman. Who's this desperate character? He's the witness to the murder I told you about. I'm trying to keep him alive. What he means is that I saw my brother killed, and I know who did it. That's dangerous knowledge, son, if the killer is still roaming free. And so a masked bad guy throws a grenade. Look out, grenade! Here's a little present for you, Shiloh. Throws in a grenade. The police detective, flies into action. Shiloh grabs the grenade, throws it back out the window, but it doesn't explode. And the reason why is that as soon as it was thrown in, Mr. Miracle used his circuitry that's in his hood, not his mother box. He doesn't refer to it as a mother box anymore, to neutralize the grenade. The storyline in this issue is it's kind of reminiscent of the storyline in Dingbats of Danger Street. Jack will do, later in his tenure at DC. There was a character in there named Good Looks who, witnessed the murder of his parents, I think, and has this sort of, crisis of if he comes forward and tells the story, then the guy who killed them, is gonna try to eliminate him and stuff. And so, it seems like Kirby's kind of thinking in those directions, and this is almost like a first draft of Dingbats of Danger Street. And the person responsible for the murder of Shiloh Norman's brother is Mr. Fez. And he's got this, giant gun that he's working on. Shiloh Norman's sleeping over at the Miracle house for his own safety. Mr. Miracle, be able to sort of protect him. But he doesn't, he escapes, ties the sheets together. Again, these post-New Gods and Forever People issues of Mr. Miracle, it feels like, Jack Kirby sort of, taking a step backward, telling like Newsboy Legion stories or something. It's kind of like, I gave you my best. You told me that was no good. And you told me to simplify and dumb it down and make it for kids. So it's like, okay, I'll, tell these sort of cardboard cutout superheroes. And yeah, he does seem like he's losing interest in the whole Mr. Miracle thing. So it's like, okay, I'm supposed to be making comics for kids. Let's introduce a kid character, somebody that the kids in the audience can relate to. And so, the next couple issues, the focus is on Shiloh Norman. Mr. Miracle and Big Barda are just marking time. They're flying around on aero discs. There's more than one way to follow a quarry. These aero discs are perfect for the job, Mr. Miracle. I built these for the act, Barda. Where we grew up, the anti-grav vehicle is as common as an Earth automobile. So a slight reference to where they grew up, but no names, no apocalypse. He didn't create those discs for the act. Those discs were standard issue, part of his bag of tricks that he brought with him from the Granny Goodness orphanage, but we're not supposed to mention that. And so they follow Shiloh Norman. He's in sort of that room where they keep the Ark of the Covenant at the end of Indiana Jones. And then he gets attacked by the bad guys. Careful, the little dude's a black belt judo expert. His brother used to brag about it. That's one of the weaknesses of this issue. I mean, I think Shiloh Norman's story is interesting. And I know Kirby does, he does in medias res, and he, tries to get the story moving as quickly as possible. But it loses something in us not getting to meet Shiloh Norman's brother, not even in a flashback. We don't get to meet him. He's sort of an off-screen presence. And I think that would have helped. This character we just met, we don't know anything about, is out for revenge for the death of somebody we've not seen, a second of, one panel of. So, but he's fighting his own, personal war against the people that killed his brother. Barda, joins the fight. You've got a terrifying right hand, Barda. I think the fight is over. I think you're right. I don't see anything moving. These are extremely simplified Jack Kirby drawings. This is very bare drawing, and you'll see this if you study Jack Kirby's work. You'll see this style pop up from time to time when he's starting to get unhappy with the conditions of the place he's working. You start to get this towards the end of his time at Marvel in 1969, 1970. Yeah, you get this in some of the issues towards the end of his time at DC, and then you get it again towards the end of his final tenure at Marvel Comics. Barda and Mr. Miracle get zapped with the Jammer. So it's Mr. Fez and Jammer. Jammer is the character, and jamming Your brain waves is what he does. And Mr. Fez wears a fez. Madame Evil Eyes has, evil eyes. It's about how deep things get, again, since the end of New Gods and Forever People and the sort of dumbing down of the Mr. Miracle series. There's a showdown. Barda, she's the muscle. She, scraps the giant gun that Mr. Fez was building a few pages ago. And then the police show up. Mr. Fez, you're busted. The law, how? It's all a plot, Mr. Fez. We couldn't travel as fast as your aerodiscs, Mr. Miracle, but we knew you could handle things until we got here. How ironic. We nailed Fez and his gang by following a boy here who wouldn't talk. I'll get you for this, Mr. Miracle. Just you wait. Let's go. This wraps it up, Shiloh. Your brother's death is avenged. You used me. You followed me like I was a Judas goat, showing you the way to the sheep pen. A pen full of wolves, Shiloh. She's right. If you'd played a lone hand, you'd have lost. But don't start thinking you're a loser, not with your reflexes. What will you do now, Shiloh? Who knows? Who cares? I do. Barda does. We can't let fast-action talent go to waste. With special power training, in addition to your judo, you might become a junior miracle. You've got what it takes, Shiloh. Coordination, courage, and standards of your own. Have you taken a good look at me? Yes, I see me as I once was, trying to escape to anywhere. And I helped him do it. I couldn't fail him. I won't fail you, Shiloh. You see, I once lost a friend who couldn't escape. Take the deal, kid. The police force can't use you until you've reached the proper age. Lieutenant Driver, I think you've bullied Shiloh into a career. So, Mr. Miracle and Big Barda take Shiloh under their wing. Barda's going to train him in special powers training like she had. Scott's going to give him, all the escape artist wizardry training he has. And so Shiloh should, surpass both of them, become this sort of superpowered wizard that has the best of both worlds and maybe grow up to be the ultimate Mr. Miracle. It's interesting, the dance that Kirby does to not mention Apocalypse. They're clearly referencing their childhood, but they're making certain not to reference that they're, from another planet or anything. Just, we know what they're talking about here, but if this is the only issue of Mr. Miracle you've never read, you wouldn't know they're from another planet. And I guess this is a course correction, and we're not going to, underline that they're from another planet and this and that. And maybe, the idea is to have a new reader think that this is, sort of semi-realistic, sort of superhero who, has a lot of technological gimmicks and things, but isn't anything that couldn't exist in the real world. Not from another planet or anything. And everything that seems supernatural has a logical explanation. But we're moving into, a new phase for Mr. Miracle. Again, there was a lot of, you could tell Jack Kirby was like, what do I do with, Mr. Miracle, since, I have to, take him out of, the context that he was born in. Like a sitcom that's sort of running out of steam. It's like, okay, let's bring in a new kid, liven things up. I mean, now they are a family, Big Barda and Mr. Miracle still do not have any romantic connection yet. As the furthest it's gotten was, Mr. Miracle saying, oh, I have Big Barda on my mind more than the other female Furies. We had Big Barda saying, until this moment, I never even thought about the question of whether I care about Scott Free. So that's as far, unable to commit to a romantic subplot between the two leads of the series. But they are now, even though they are not quite a couple, they haven't taken any steps towards being, even a couple. They now are, co-parenting an orphan and now, sort of form a family here. I don't know if that was so smart. Escape artists could give us police a lot of trouble. This one won't. Let's go, Shiloh. The next time they tie you to a cannon, you'll get free of it on your own. They won't make a trap that will hold you. And it is interesting, the sort of, parallels between Shiloh and Mr. Miracle. And, what Grant Morrison did with Mr. Miracle and with Shiloh Norman as Mr. Miracle was, incredibly interesting and really, found a way to bring, these characters from the 70s into the 21st century. And so even though Kirby doesn't get to really pay off on the promise of, they're going to train him to be, the ultimate Mr. Miracle, Grant Morrison did kind of, pick up on that, many decades later. Next, on-the-job training for a superhero spells only one thing: Shiloh Norman, super trouble. Great font there, great lettering, great title lettering there on Super Trouble. Okay, this could be an interesting story. Watch, Mr. Miracle and Big Barda train a kid to, become a superhero. It definitely has promise. Spoiler, it doesn't deliver on the promise. And the comic will be canceled within a few issues. And so now we get to the letters column, and this is the letters column where they finally address directly the whole ending of New Gods and Forever People, and the readers are bummed. They're super bummed, and they're hoping that somehow Jack Kirby will get to wrap up this just really compelling, once in a lifetime story that they were able to sort of be there on the ground floor with. Just some excerpts. Dear Jack, this is a very sad Dear Jack letter. Sad because I have found out that the New Gods and Forever People are no more. What a shock for one who had come home from college wanting to catch up on his reading. A terrible shock. So, and that sort of underlines what, Carmine Infantino had said about this series, that it did great with the college students, but in his opinion, it just wasn't connecting with, the kids. Dear Jack and gang, Mr. Miracle has taken a turn, one for the worse, I'm afraid. Instead of a magazine of unique breeding, what one gets now when he buys an MM comic is a souped-up version of Ed Sullivan. Come on, guys. That won't even cut it on TV. We've already had a Houdini in this world, and no matter what kind of gadgets or traps you give Mr. Miracle, his escapes just won't seem miraculous. Can you imagine how boring it's going to get watching Scott-Free escape from inescapable traps, issue after issue? Pretty soon I'd be willing to wager all references to the New Genesis Apocalypse War will be forgotten. The response to these letters, I'd assume by Steve Sherman, maybe with some input from Jack, and it says, even though New Gods and Forever People ceased publication with their 11th issues some months back, it seems that the majority of our readers are still very much concerned with the outcome of the trilogy, as this month's collection of mail will attest to. The above 3 letters are just a sampling of the many we have received. Their cancellation was as big a disappointment to us as it was to you, but a decision was made, and so it must be. Our concern now is with the future, and you, the reader, play a very important role. As the remaining link in the trilogy, many of you understandably felt that the final chapters of the saga would be played out in this magazine. As yet, it has not happened, and it probably won't. And as long as it doesn't, Orion Lightray and the Forever People and even Darkseid will remain very much alive. Their adventures are not over, but temporarily frozen in time. Jack has not abandoned them. When the opportunity arises again, they will return on a grand scale. And what of Scott-Free and Company? There is much in store for them, as this issue merely begins to suggest. Jack is taking them in a direction he feels is in touch with what you want. And that is where your letters play a key role. Your reaction to the stories, along with sales, are the guidelines for any magazine, and we're no exception. Jack is doing his best to see that Mr. Miracle remains as exciting as ever. The villains will be villainous, and the heroics just as spectacular as they have always been. For no matter where Scott and Barda's adventures take them, they are and will always be part of the New Gods. I like this image here of Darkseid watching Desaad, sort of fade away into a little patch of dim light, after the Omega effect. It's a really nice image to as sort of like a capper of the whole New Gods thing. It's sort of, melancholy, and it's like, goodbye, old friend, this sort of, farewell to this, this great era of comics, my favorite, body of comics work is now done and over with, and nice image to sum it up. I'm Tom Scioli, author of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics. I Am Stan, a graphic biography of the legendary Stan Lee, and Jack Kirby's Star Warriors, starring Adam Starr and the Solar Legion. Tomorrow, Monday, August 28th, is Jack Kirby's 106th birthday, and it's also the final order cutoff date for Jack Kirby's Star Warriors from Image Comics. If you'd like your local retailer to set aside a copy for you, let them know immediately because the deadline's tomorrow. I'll see you next time for New God Sunday School.